Sean Bagshaw is a landscape travel photographer and photo educator based in Ashland, Oregon, where he lives with his wife and two sons. Sean started his photography business in 2004. Before that, he was a middle school science teacher. Always a traveller, adventurer and experienced junkie, thanks to his mum and dad for raising him in the hills of southern Oregon, Sean began taking photos in college because he wanted to record and share his explorations. Now he goes on adventures with the main purpose of taking photos. When not creating, Sean enjoys teaching and sharing. His dream has always been to be able to combine photography with teaching. In addition to selling fine art prints and licensing his images, he teaches image developing, leads workshops and gives presentations whenever possible. Sean has found he's been able to reach the most people, though, through his video tutorials and YouTube videos. Sean is also a member of the photography team Photo Cascadia, working with Tony Kuiper. These talented folks are his travel companions, business partners, close friends and constant inspiration. We discuss his transition from full-time teacher to full-time photographer and educator, how he structured his business for success and where his favourite locations are, along with a lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day Sean, welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Great, Grant. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you very much. You've been a name on my very long list for a very long time. Well, I say a very long time. I've only been doing this about 18 months. But, you were very near the top of the list for quite some time. But I thought I'd build up a bit of a following before I dragged you into this. Why don't you tell people that might not know Sean Bagshaw who you are and where you are and kind of what you do?
Sure. I'm Sean Bagshaw. I'm in Southern Oregon, Ashland, Oregon, to be specific. And we're the last town in Southern Oregon before you hit the California border. So I'm just about 15 miles from the northern border of California, and it's a great place to be if you're a landscape photographer. And I'm a landscape and travel photographer and photography educator, and I've been doing this now getting close to 20 years. I think I'm at 19-ish years, maybe, doing it full time, which seems crazy. It doesn't seem like very long, but my previous career was as a middle school science and math teacher.
Okay.
And it feels like I did that a really long time, but I realized I only did that for 12 yeyears. So
wow.
I've been doing this longer than the thing I think I did a long time. But I'm really happy to have been able to do both. It's been a real treat to be a teacher and a photographer, and now to be a photography teacher.
Yeah. So you're putting together the photography skills with the education skills that you've gained over the years and come up with a pretty good formula for a business.
It did come out that way. I with a teaching training and background, I am a horrible business person, so I never planned any of that. But I think I am pretty good at kind of riding whatever wave happens to be coming by at the moment. Mm-hmm. And so I never could have planned it out this way at the beginning, but that's the way that it's worked out. And I'm really glad that it has, because I think I don't have a lot of skills, but I think teaching and photography are two of the skills. If I have any, those are probably about it. And nice. To be able to combine them both in the work I do and share photography with other people has just been a dream for me.
Yeah, I honestly don't think there's anything better than being able to share both the passion, but also the ways of showing people how to open up their creativity. I think it's a marvelous thing to be able to do.
I agree.
Why don't we go right back to the beginning? So where did Sean pick up his first camera? How did looking down the lens come about?
Sure. I think I had, some little Instamatic camera when I was a kid that I got as a gift, and it was fun. You could put a little roll of film in it and it took 6 photos or something. And mm-hmm. I played around with that mostly as a toy at that point. So I can't say that was actually my start in photography. I think my real start in photography was in college. And while I was at university, I also was very interested and got involved in kind of outdoor adventure sports, mostly mountaineering, rock climbing, backpacking, some mountain biking, and kayaking and stuff like that. And I became interested in just documenting it, just trying to get some documentary photos to record the things I was doing, mostly so I could try to, brag to my friends and family or trap people. I did. Yeah. Yeah, basically trap people in a dark room, and show them slides for hours until they beg to leave, that kind of thing. But at the time I did that just with a slightly more advanced, but still one button single, just single lens instant camera that I could just hang from my harness when I was rock climbing and just hold it out and click the button. Shooting slide film, that was probably the early 90s at that time. And I loved it. It was fun to kind of create those documents of adventures and then share them with people. But there were definitely a few photos, very few, I would say, maybe 1 in 100 or 1 in 300, where something came together and that particular image was more enjoyable to look at, more intriguing, more compelling than the other ones. And that got me thinking, okay, well, if it's possible to take those kind of photos 1 in a few hundred, what are the elements and components of that, and how can I do that more frequently? And so that
how do you improve the odds?
Exactly. How do you improve the odds? How do you up the ROI there? Yeah. So I started, doing some very rudimentary research into how to take photos, how cameras work, what are the elements of photography, and really then became interested in photography more as an art form and a pursuit all its own. And I kind of transitioned over a few years of time from going on trips and expeditions to climb mountains to going on trips and expeditions to take pictures of the mountains.
Sure.
And that's what really got me into it, and did that for several years. And at some point thought, yeah, I wonder if there's a way to make a living doing this, because I love it so much.
Fantastic. So in terms of that motivation, is it all about being in the outdoors, or is it all about capturing the shot? Which came first, I guess, and which is it that really sort of drives you to get out there and do it?
I think for me, it's all about being in the outdoors and having the experience. Yeah. And that's a question that comes up a lot. And it's interesting as I talk to different people, folks like yourself that are doing podcasts or whatever, and also just talking with some of my colleagues and friends about, what's their motivation. And certainly some people are motivated by the photography first. And I've met people that hate being out in the dark and the cold, and, and hiking with a lot.
They don't want to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning to see a sunrise, but they do it.
Yeah, they hate all that, but they really want the photo, and so they put up with it to get the photo. Where I'm the flip of that. I'm out doing that stuff anyway. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I'm out doing it without a camera, and that's just fine. Bringing the camera along is a bonus for me. It gives me a different way to kind of experience those times in the outdoors, in the landscape. And I connect, I think, I slow down, I connect more deeply with the landscape and the light and all that's around me. And then if I end up recording a photo or two that I enjoy, or that helps communicate my experience to other people, then that's a real bonus. But certainly the outdoor adventure is the primary motivation for me.
Yeah, fantastic. One thing I really like to understand from photographers, and I'm still trying to understand this a little bit myself, is how important it is for some people to have a goal or a project in their photography, and how much planning they put into those elements, as opposed to being more spontaneous. And as you say, well, maybe you're going to be in that place anywhere, you just happen to have a camera, bang, take the shot, and if it's a good one, great. So where are you on that spectrum from spontaneity back to detailed planning?
I think I'm probably lean towards the spontaneity end of the spectrum a bit more, but I definitely do some planning, and I do have some level of kind of preconceptualizing or, conceptualizing ideas for photos that I want to take, but I'm definitely more spontaneous. And again, I think everyone interfaces with photography in a different way. And that's one of the things that I think is great about it.
Yeah.
And I definitely know people who are very deliberate and conceptual and planned out about their photography. And yeah, I'm just not that way. I definitely go out, and usually the photos I end up taking, if I did spend any time thinking about what photos I might take, the photos I do end up taking are very different from those, from whatever ideas I ended up having. And I do follow the light. And I also don't get super wrapped up in feeling like I need to be photographing all the time, which I think is kind of that, some people that are very goal oriented with their photography. It's like, I need to have, X number of shutter clicks per day or per week, or I'm not, meeting my targets or whatever. But I go months at a time without taking a photo sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm spontaneous. If I'm feeling a photo, if I see something, then I get the camera out. And if I'm not, I don't. And like I said before, some of my favorite photos are ones that I never could have predicted or guessed in any way.
Totally unplanned. Yeah.
Totally unplanned. Had no idea they're going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, they tend to be the ones I like more than the ones where I have actually deliberately gone to a place and said, all right, well, I know this is there. I want to go and take a shot of it, and off I go. But those spontaneous ones that you find, I think, are sometimes way more enjoyable to look at, to play with, and to work with in the post processing suite.
Yep. And I hear that from people, in fact, I had an email just in the last week or so, but a lot of them come on a similar theme is, so I went to this place. I knew the photo I wanted to get. I'd seen other photos like it. I had an idea of what the weather and lighting that I wanted was going to be. And so I went there, and, for whatever reason, that time I went to this place, it all lined up perfectly. And in the first attempt, I got my photo. And then I wondered what else.
Yeah, what's next?
They're like, so I didn't know what else to do at that point. I had taken the photo that I saw in my mind, and then I didn't know where to go from there. And I think that's something that people struggle with, is that idea of getting themselves into a corner or a box of, I saw this thing, I'm going to create that. But then once I've created that, and that, where do I go?
Yeah, what's next? Yeah. So how do you deal with that yourself? How do you deal with that personally?
I just, like I said, for me, it's all the experience first, and I just go walk around. I look, I see, I get on top of things. I poke my head behind things, down holes, over the edges of cliffs or whatever. And, climb up something, descend down into a canyon, have the adventure, wade through the river. And if I do all of that and no photos come of it, I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. But almost always, rarely do I go through that experience or that process and not find something that compels me to want to take a photograph. But if I do, there are those times when nothing strikes me, or I'm just not in the mood to take a photograph, then I go with that. That's fine. Then I just am enjoying my time being out doing whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's a great approach, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of how you've evolved your photography, you mentioned first off it was kind of documenting what it was you were doing and where you were. How has that sort of evolved into something that's far more artistic? Because in my opinion anyway, you tend to be more of an artistic photographer than a documentary photographer. And it's not to say your shots aren't realistic. They certainly are. But it's, where would you put yourself on that spectrum and in that evolution from documentary photography through to artistic photography?
That's a great question, boy. It's funny. I think for myself, I've felt like almost kind of from the beginning that I was really far from documentary photography, far from very literal realistic photography. But
Mhm.
I noticed that as time has gone on, I hear more and more other people who describe my photography as being very realistic or true or I don't know, believable. I don't know, those kinds of descriptors. And it's funny, I think because, I started in film and then I was on the early cutting edge of digital cameras and Photoshop image developing and a lot of that stuff. And so at that time, I really was kind of out beyond what the film photographers had been able to do for the decades leading up to that.
Yeah.
And it was pushing the boundaries, and it was seen to be, because it didn't look like traditional film photography, it was then not real or not authentic, or, there was a lot of those kinds of things. So I remember saying to people, like, well, I'm not trying to be literal or a realist here. It's more impressionism. It's more hyper reality, or, those kinds of things.
Sure,
and I feel like my sensibilities of how I photograph haven't changed, but now that whole digital age has caught and passed me. And now we see so much just fantastic, fantabulous sort of imagery, which I love. Now my images are often referred to as being kind of traditional or normal.
To be honest, though, there's nothing wrong with being traditional or normal.
Yeah. No, I don't mind either way. Because in the end, I think we're all just doing what we do. And so I'm not trying to do anything. I just make the images that make sense to me. And it's just interesting to see other people's perceptions went from, whoa, he's really radical and he's breaking rules and he's pushing the boundaries and his photos don't look real, to now, well, yeah, he's pretty conservative with how he develops his photos. And I'm like, I'm still doing it the same.
Yeah, you don't feel that anything's changed a great deal.
Yeah.
I think that artistic choice or that creative choice to, not necessarily add things. I'm not against composites or anything like that, as long as it's kind of clear that that's what you're doing, is creating digital art as opposed to just straight photography. And I'm certainly not opposed to straight photography where, I've tried to capture as many of these elements in one shot I'd personally do a lot of exposure blending in my photography, and largely because it's dealing with high dynamic range. So I'm trying to capture what I can see with my eye, which my camera can't.
Of course, yeah. And I think to me, that's again the beauty of this thing, if we're going to call it art, is that we all get to do it how it makes sense to us or how we want to engage with it. And you can do it all different ways. Yeah. And I'm the same. If I see some composite work that is just amazing, it's the skill and the artistry required to create some of the composite imagery that I see is just off the chart. Is it traditional photography? No, but are we measuring everything on whether it meets some traditional photography, playbook? I'm not. I mean, maybe some people do that.
Yeah, I know that there are, and it's weird. I see arguments online of people saying, it should be all captured in one, and I haven't, I've barely processed it and everything, and it's kind of like, yeah, but you're also sometimes there missing out on some of the creative elements and the creative choices that you can make. I'm not saying you shouldn't restrict yourself sometimes, because that restriction itself can bring about other creative choices. But I think a lot of people, they kind of sit on either side of the spectrum, rather than kind of going, yeah, well, it's all part of the same coin, and we really shouldn't be having arguments about whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, you can like something or you can not like something, and that's fine. But in terms of whether or not somebody should be doing something some way, I just don't understand why these arguments brew up.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had conversations with lots of friends who who's have a whole range of different ideas and attitudes or opinions about that. And I definitely can see, if you're someone who has invested, a lot of time and energy and skill and years of practice, and maybe, dedicated yourself to going certain places at certain times to create certain images. And there's a whole work flow and body of work there that requires. I mean, that's a huge amount of commitment and skill. And for someone else to come along and sit at their computer and type away and create something that matches or surpasses this thing that you worked years to be able to do, I can see how that ruffles some feathers, on some people.
Sure.
But then again, I'm still in this place of, but we don't all work the same. And so, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to feel like one person doing what they do takes away from me doing what I do. I really feel like it should all be able to exist, of its own. And it's just a little bit about maybe knowing something behind the story behind, like this person's photos were created this way, and this is their process. And this person's photos are created some other way, and this is their process. And if you care about those sorts of things, then that may play into, how you relate with those different pieces. Yeah. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we don't always get to know that information. We just see.
That's it. It's really hard in a place like Twitter, for example. You've got 144 characters, and you can't explain the whole process.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Or most people just scroll their Instagram feed at 100 miles an hour, and images just go winging by, and you don't. Even if somebody did explain what they went through,
they're not reading the captions.
Yeah. So. That's the challenges of the age we live in, I guess.
Definitely. I'm really interested in what you see makes a unique image. Is it the place, the composition? Is it the environment or the overall experience around how the image was made?
Yeah, boy. It's changed. It's evolved over time, for sure. I mean, there was a time when just being able to create a decent image at all somewhere made it a good image. Just if you had the equipment and the skills, I'm thinking of kind of Ansel Adams era type photography. I mean, if you could lug a 40-pound camera into the High Sierra,
and all the glass plates and
all the glass plates.
All the rest of that.
Yeah. And you had 10 glass plates, and you spent a week and you took 10 photos.
Yep.
And if you could get one good photo out of those 10, then that made it a good photo. Yeah. And if you then also had some artistic sensibilities that you could also bring to the game with that too. Nowadays, I just see so many different things. For a while, it was really about, being able to utilize the technology. When we moved from film to digital, it's like, if you could use those digital tools and do things like exposure blending to overcome issues of dynamic range, or focus blending to overcome issues of depth of field, or, on and on and on, all these ways that digital allows us to overcome traditional boundaries and shortcomings of camera equipment, then that made it a good photo. And now I'm seeing that, we're even going beyond that to where some of it's going back to very more simple basics of photography, but vision and, what is your creative eye? What is it that you see out there in the world, and how do you frame it, and how do you choose to record it and present it to other people in a way, that comes from inside you, inside your mind, that doesn't matter what camera or what image editing software or what computer anyone else had. You're the only one who saw it and captured it and presented it that way. So more and more, I feel like those are the things that really interest me. That, and also finding and going places to photograph in landscape photography. And I think it probably applies to other genres of photography also, but where you're actually doing something different, maybe photographing something that hasn't been necessarily photographed before, which gets harder and harder these days. I mean, so many of the photos that we see that are beautiful and technically excellent, but they're basically recreations of photos that have been taken over and over and over and over again.
Mm. Yeah, it's really hard to take a different photo. I live in Sydney, the Sydney Harbour Bridge or the Opera House. I keep using those as examples. There's only so many angles where you can actually take a shot. But I still do see people coming up with unique compositions or unique angles that I've not seen before, or somebody else. And the other side of that is that I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that iconic shot of an iconic location wherever it is, as long as you've never done it before, I guess, and it's your take on it.
Sure. Absolutely. And I'm the same. I don't have, and if I'm in a place, no matter how many times it's been photographed, if I'm feeling like I want to take a photo, I take a photo. Okay. And it really comes from in here, that feeling. And even in, a place that's been photographed, like the Sydney Opera House, which your photos are just brilliant of it, by the way. Well, as much as it's been photographed, yours are great. And knowing a place, being intimate with a place,
that helps. Yeah.
Being able to visit it and photograph it over and over again. And then some of those fine personal nuances start to come out, where you notice that certain time of day or that certain time of year or that one particular type of lighting that only rarely happens. Or if I just stand 10 feet to the left and then put my tripod another foot higher, then it's a whole different image than I've ever seen before. Yeah. And those kinds of images are fresh and new and creative, even from places that get photographed to death. And sometimes knowing a place intimately is what makes that possible.
Yeah, it can actually be an advantage because you're able to go back and repeat and practice and learn from mistakes and say, oh, I know where I should have stood.
Right. Absolutely.
What does success look like for you in your photography? That could be the photographs and the images themselves, or it could be in business.
Yeah. It's funny. Forever, I've always wanted to keep photography and the business of photography kind of separate in my mind. But you can't be in this business, if photography is what pays your bills and turns the lights on and, helps your kids go to college, it's hard to then separate the pure photography from the pure business stuff. Success, I guess for me, success in photography, just creatively and artistically and personally, is that I enjoy it, that it's fun and engaging and challenging, that I'm not bored with it, and that I'm always learning and progressing or evolving. Yep. To me, that's success in photography. And then, over a long period of time, that will lead where it leads. And hopefully, if you're really immersing yourself in the art form, you're going to evolve and progress and create better and better work. I just think that's true. Yeah. It's people that don't enjoy the photography, I think, that kind of stagnate or get stuck or just lose their inspiration. In terms of success in a business sense, I think anyone who is doing photography legitimately as their business and makes their living or even part of their living as a photographer has succeeded, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah. I mean, especially landscape photography or, travel photography. Who wouldn't want to go out and travel around and go to pretty places and take photos of it, and then that's how you make your living. So there's no job for that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, and that's why I think it's really taken off, that there are so many people
Yeah.
Photography used to be this obscure thing that hardly anyone did. It was kind of some weirdos back in the early days.
Particularly landscape photography, weddings, portraits, that sort of thing. That was kind of separate. Sure. And maybe some of those guys did landscape on the side for themselves and didn't really do much with it,
Exactly. You were this kind of fringe of society hermit who wandered in the wilderness and then hid in your dark room or whatever you did, right. But now in the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's like this explosion of interest in photography. And, so many people enjoy photography as a hobby and a pastime and all of that. And so if you can take that and then also figure out how to make a living at that, I just think that's successful. And it's not easy at all. There's no job listing for landscape photographer. You can't go in the help wanted ads and, submit your application.
People are employing them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to create it for yourself. And anyone who finds a way, whether that's through, selling prints, working on assignment commercially or editorially, whether that's teaching other people how to do it, whether it's writing, whether it's, or a combination of all of those. I think that's success right there.
Yeah. Talking about that lifestyle choice, because that's kind of what it is. If you're going to go full time, it's definitely a lifestyle choice. How did you make that decision? Did it come naturally and it was an obvious thing to do, or was it forced on you, or was it something that you'd thought about for a long time and thought, I could give it a go?
I've told this story a few times over the years, and it's funny because, again, I just think that I just love photography so much, along with a lot of other things that I like to do so much. But I definitely, never found a way to make a living doing any of those other things that I love to do. Sure. And so photography kind of fits, I love to mountain bike, but I was in no danger of ever being a professional mountain biker. Yep. I love to climb mountains, but I was never in danger of being a professional mountain climber. There's just, those things were not on the table. Sure. But I categorize my photography in with my other hobbies like that. And so the point at which I decided to make a lifestyle switch was I'd been doing my teaching career for 10 or 12 years and I loved it. But my wife and my wife was also a middle school science teacher. So we had the same job, and because we understood each other's jobs and we had the exact same schedule, we could completely throw ourselves into our teaching, which we did. But then we had our own kids and realized that we couldn't continue working the teaching jobs with the same level of hours and intensity that we had been and grown accustomed to, and also be decent parents to our kids. And that's when we started thinking about, okay, so how can we maybe try to create a lifestyle that's a little more flexible and we can be at home more and have more energy and time for our own kids. And at that time we had some savings, not a ton. It was a decent amount of savings that, my wife said, okay, this sounds like you want to give this photography thing a go. You've got 5 years to try to make back your teacher's salary, which at the time was a pretty low bar because teachers in the United States don't get paid a lot. So it wasn't a high bar.
It's the same here in Australia.
Yeah. But I thought, well, there's no chance that I'll do that, but I can't pass. I need to at least give it a try. And in the end, I will have had the wonderful experience of playing photographer for 5 years, and then I'll be re-energized to go back to teaching. I honestly believe that was what was going to happen. Sure. But somehow, right at the 5-year mark, I managed to scrape together a teacher salary out of photography. Wow. And then thought, all right, I guess I did it. I guess I get to keep going. And I really just felt like that every day since then, is like, all right, I'm still scraping this together. So I guess I get to keep going.
Fantastic. That's great.
It is great. I don't know how it works or how it happened, because like I said, I'm not someone who plans well or, devises a business strategy. But I'm also not going to, I'm not going to argue with it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. One of the things people starting their photography business journey, or and even if they're still doing it part time and they just wanting to make a bit of money on the side, is trying to formulate a way for pricing your work. And here I'm not talking about setting the actual price yourself, but working out, okay, this is what I need to price it at to get myself into a state where I'm actually earning money out of it. Did you think about it in that way, or was it more, okay, well, I'll just sort of start pricing it based on what I see around the market? Or did you do something more formulaic to come up with a formula for deciding how to set a price?
Yeah, I feel like, at least in the United States, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the United States, for sure, that's been a real moving target in the entire time that I've been in the business. And maybe it's always been that way. And also it varies depending on, what your products are, and also what your, kind of your geographic reach is. Because I know here in Southern Oregon, when I first started, I was taking any job that involved a camera that paid a few bucks, So I was photographing, high school senior portraits and weddings, and I photographed people's pets. I photographed, custom furniture. I photographed real estate and architecture. You name it. I did magazine assignments, all of it. If somebody said, "Can you take a picture of this and we'll pay you some money?" I said yes.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Yeah, and all of those, the pricing would vary, I found. But also from where I am in Southern Oregon, I would go online and read like, well, if you're doing a commercial photo shoot of, product photography, this is what you need to charge. And in my little small community here, I'm like, I can't charge the guy who's making homemade furniture in his,
you can't charge him $350 an hour or whatever.
Yeah, it's just not in his budget. So a lot of it was knowing, what my own market was, and then also figuring out, okay, so how much can I actually, in terms of, back to your question of what do I need to charge, how much money do I need to bring in? What are my expenses? And then, how much do I need to charge to cover the expenses and have an income? Then I, began looking at like, all right, so maybe my local community here is good for getting the wheels turning and getting experience and getting going. But then I need to start branching out and going beyond that. And that eventually did come. Back then it was, stock photography and print sales. And so I could sell those further abroad and, target advertising agencies in New York City that did pay a lot of money to license an image, where, I could maybe charge $50 here in Ashland, Oregon. I could charge $5,000 in New York City. Yeah, so tapping into some of that was helpful, but even that market then kind of disappeared, that moving target. And then right about somewhere in there is when the teaching piece kind of hit me in the head by accident. And that to now has been, for me, the most reliable way to make an income, is that there are enough people in the world who want to learn photography that there's a market, and I can pay, or I can charge I think a reasonable price and also still make a reasonable income.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's really great advice, I think. In terms of where you like to shoot, I mean, you've obviously shot all over the world. You've been to Iceland, et cetera. What's your favorite place to have shot?
Well, I'm pretty sure my favorite place when I finally get there will be Australia.
So you've not been?
I've not been to Australia. It's high on my bucket list. I know quite a few photographers from Australia. I have some good mates actually from Australia who come over here to photograph in Oregon, and I meet them when they come here. But no, I think for Australia, it's a far enough trip and it's a big place with so much that I know I want to
do a lot of
do
different landscapes. I mean, even just along the coastline of the state I'm in, you go from, down the south coast where there's lots of sea stacks, etc., through to golden beaches, to white sand beaches, to red sand beaches, to it's varied, and that's just the coastline of one of the states. And then you get up into Queensland, you've got the Barrier Reef and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know, that, how big it is and how diverse it is. And so it's been I've been putting it on the back burner until I have a chance to come and spend some time and do it right. I don't want to just show up.
Coming for a week's not gonna cut it.
Yeah, just coming for a week and hitting a couple of highlights is not gonna. I mean, that would still be great. I would love that too. But photographically, yeah, I want to come and be able to spend some time. But it is high on my list for sure. In terms of places that have been, I got my start in the mountains with photography, and so I have a real soft spot for mountain photography. So, boy, the Himalayas, the Alps, the Italian Alps, the Dolomites, the Rocky Mountains, both in the United States and in Canada, the Cascade Range that, is my home mountain range here in the West Coast, the Sierra Mountains down in California. I just can't get enough mountains and traveling in the mountains and photographing in mountains. And the other place that really has captured me in more recent years is the coastal redwood forest. The Northern California coastal redwood forest is only about 2 hours from where I live, so I can get there fairly quickly. And I find myself just going back there all the time, and there's just something about being in those forests that is I can't compare to anything else.
Yeah, it's definitely a place on my bucket list. Same with the Oregon coast, and actually all the way up Washington, up into Vancouver.
It's a very beautiful part of the world out here for sure. Well, if you get in this area, definitely give me a ring and let me know.
Certainly will. Certainly will. One of the things, talking about where you live and where you shoot, how I'm really interested in how that influences maybe how you shoot and what you shoot. Or do you go into the field thinking, okay, well, I'm going to shoot this way because, let's say it's the coast that you're on and you want to catch some, water flow or whatever, and so therefore that's going to dictate a quarter second or a half second shutter speed or whatever. How does where you are dictate what you want to shoot, or do you look at it in a different way?
Yeah, I think I really just kind of respond in the moment to, whatever's going on. I mean, there's definitely some landscape photographers that, use a lot of different techniques, but I find that a lot of landscape photographers, you kind of have your tripod, your camera body, kind of your three key lenses, the wide angle out to your telephoto, couple filters, and you're good for pretty much whatever you run across. And then with that kit, then you're kind of just responding to, what you're seeing and what the conditions are. Certainly, working with different shutter speeds and different depths of field and going super wide angle and doing forced perspectives with extreme close-up foregrounds in places where that, makes sense to do. And then going the other way, going telephoto and picking out small scenes and finding small details and isolating areas. That's a lot of fun to do too. So I don't know that I'm that different from a lot of landscape photographers in those respects. The one thing I have noticed that has really changed for me in the last few years, and part of this is the advance in camera technology and the ability to photograph at higher ISOs So you can, and with image stabilization in camera and in the lens and all of that stuff, being able to get off the tripod.
Yeah.
And so nowadays, if I've got any amount of light and I can shoot handheld, I'm going for that. And nowadays, even into very low light, and being able to photograph handheld really changes the game in a lot of ways. Being able to put that camera anywhere you want in a moment's notice.
Yeah. Being able to really react to the light and to the environment.
Absolutely. And, and now you can even, like my camera does in camera focus bracketing. So even if I want to, get the camera in a place where there's no depth of field, there's no aperture that's going to capture the depth of field, well, I can set it up to handhold and just press the shutter, and it bam, 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 fires a series of focus points that I can focus stack later. And I can do that holding it one hand, up over my head somewhere where I could never get a tripod in place.
No,
so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of new technology that's really changed the way that people take photos, even down to the phones now. You got 45 megapixels in the latest iPhone, for example. Which just blows my mind, the quality of some of the images. I saw we had the lunar eclipse last night, and
how was it?
Yeah, pretty good. We had reasonable conditions here in Sydney. You could see it go red, and you got the totality and everything. So it was quite nice.
Very nice. Did you get it? Did you photograph it?
I personally didn't. The moon's not my thing, but that's
fair enough. Although that blood moon over the Opera House could be pretty
yeah. Well, the thing is that there's plenty of other people doing it, so I kind of
fair enough.
And it's not been there, done that, but it's kind of like, I don't necessarily want to copy everyone else.
Totally. But anyway, but you had it. It was there.
Did see some unique shots this morning, actually, coming out of people. But the point I was trying to make is that some of those shots were handheld on iPhones, and just mind blowing that you can actually get that dynamic range and get the detail. I mean, it's not necessarily you'll never blow it up to a 3 meter print.
Right. No, we live in an incredible time, and what a fun activity to be able to do,
Absolutely.
Photography, and that you don't have to be a dedicated photographer with a big backpack full of photography equipment. If you don't want to, you can go out with the thing everyone's carrying around in their pocket and take some really creative, artistic, wonderful images.
That's it. Yeah. Speaking about memorable experiences, what's your most memorable experience while out shooting?
Oh boy. I'm trying to, let's see, what would it be? I've had so many over the years. I think there's one that comes back to me often. It was kind of from kind of the early days, maybe the first few years of when I was trying to do landscape photography fairly seriously. And it's not because the story itself or, anything that happened or even necessarily the photographs were anything special. But it was just kind of the setup for it, where I had gone to Glacier National Park in the fall season to try to, create some beautiful photographs. I spent 9 days there, and whatever the weather pattern was that fall was just horrible. It was just fogged in, clouded in, raining for the whole time. I never saw the mountains. They were, it was low elevation clouds or sideways raining. I had an old Volkswagen Eurovan camper van at the time that I was staying in while I was out there. And I remember I even would pull out on the side of the road and roll open the sliding door and set up my tripod inside the van and photograph out of the van, because that was the only way I could even get a photo without my lens just getting soaked. And I basically spent 9 days and didn't get any images to speak of, and it's too bad nowadays. I would, even in those conditions, find some great photographic opportunities. But back then I was just so focused on that I was going to be photographing these peaks of Glacier National Park and waterfalls and fall color and all that stuff. And so I just, when that stuff wasn't there, I didn't know what to do with myself. So I came home, and it's about 800 or 900 mile drive from Montana back to Oregon, and 9 days and nothing to show for it. And I was kind of depressed, and got home. And then the next morning, for some reason, I thought, you know what? You just need to get back on the horse and get back out there. So I drove about an hour in the dark before sunrise from my house up the Rogue River, the upper Rogue River.
Yep.
And as I was driving, I kind of saw this gap on the horizon and some amazing clouds. And I thought, you know what? I think the sun is going to rise through that gap on the horizon. And I made it to a place called the Rogue River Gorge, which is this nice rock gorge with the kind of a cascade of water coming through it.
Yep.
And just photographed the most life-affirming, stunning sunrise that I've seen before or since. I made some photographs that I really loved, and did it within an hour of my house. And so, just after having that whole 9-day experience, which was really disheartening and depressing and whatnot, and was ready to quit. Then 1 day later to go out near my own home, not hundreds of miles away, and have this just incredible photographic experience, taught me a great lesson about, what is it we're really doing out here, and, just how things in the world and in life go. I mean, that's just how life is, and so, and all of that sticks with me. Like I said, it wasn't the most spectacular place I've been. It wasn't my best photo. It wasn't anything harrowing, but it definitely sticks with me.
So, talking about harrowing experiences, was the 9 days your horror story, or have you got other horror stories?
No, I wouldn't say that was a horror story. Because I was pretty comfortable. I had a nice VW camper van to sleep in, and I had food, and so it wasn't fun, and I wasn't making photographs that I enjoyed, but I wasn't suffering at all. Let's see, harrowing. Back in the day, I climbed Denali, Mount McKinley in Alaska on 2 different occasions, and did some photography up there at high elevations. That the whole experience being out there, living on the mountain like that, and trying to climb a peak like that is harrowing. I trekked through the Himalayas around Mount Everest by myself, solo. Had some definitely interesting experiences out there that were somewhat harrowing in different ways. So those kinds of experiences are definitely out there, but somehow those aren't the ones that stick out in my mind. Those are just part of I guess I feel like, being cold or being tired or being sore or those kinds of things kind of go with the territory. I love that stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you're not, you're probably not going far enough to get the shot.
Correct. Yeah. And I think for me, the things I remember are, light events, just special moments where everything kind of came together, and I got to be there at this time that just, I just don't even have words for. I can't describe the experience of getting to be there in a moment of time.
As a teacher, you'd probably understand this question. What have you learned about the world through the practice of photography?
Well, I've definitely learned to, kind of as I alluded to earlier, to slow down and pay attention, and really focus on the moment that you're living at that moment. I think as people, we spend a lot of time very wrapped up in our minds in the past and in the future, or even on things, imaginary things that never happened and probably never will happen. And even, like I said, being out in the landscape without a camera, I'm still in that place in my mind where I'm thinking about the next election cycle, or, how am I going to pay some bills, or that thing I said 2 years ago that now I feel stupid. I wish I'd never said it. And I replay it in my mind over and over again.
Yeah, all of those things that our little inner voices do to us. Yeah,
exactly. But with photography, when the camera comes out and I'm out in the landscape, I truly am paying attention to what's actually happening and what I'm actually seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling at that moment. And that's been really valuable. And it's helped me be able to also translate that to when I don't have a camera. Which I don't know that I ever would have.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the post-processing side of things. We've talked a fair bit about how, getting out into the world and taking the shot and lining up the comp is, that's all about it, but you do a fantastic line in YouTube videos, and I've learnt quite a bit from sitting watching you doing things. Where did you learn your post-processing? Was it trial and error, other people's YouTube, or did you go through some formal training somewhere?
I did not go through formal training, and when I was learning, there was no YouTube. There wasn't even social media. It was pre anything. The one thing so a lot of it was trial and error. A lot of it was just fiddling around and doing it the slowest, wrongest possible way. But in the early days, when I was getting into when I got my first digital camera, which I think was about 2001.
Yep.
And that was also when I first, Photoshop had been around before that, but unless you were scanning your film, you weren't using Photoshop.
Yeah.
So once I got a digital camera, then Photoshop, and that just opened up this whole world of possibilities that I never had before, because, until then I would take photos on slide film and send off the roll of film and cross my fingers and then be disappointed with what came back. So being able to develop my own images was just groundbreaking. And at that time, there was a website here. It still exists. It's called naturephotographers.net, NPN. This was early 2000s. I don't know when the site itself actually started, but it was an old forum bulletin board sort of website.
Yep.
But you could actually post images and other photographers could critique, and you would share ideas and give suggestions. And that's where a lot of my learning took place, was in that community on that website, meeting other photographers who I didn't know any others in my area, but was able to meet people online and share ideas. And we were all kind of figuring it out together because it was brand new. Yeah. And so it was really fun. And a lot of those people that I knew from those days are still my friends and colleagues to this day. In fact, everyone who's in Photo Cascadia, which is a photo group that I'm a member of, that we've been going for about 13 years now, we all know each other from that website. And I was really excited because that website kind of fell into disrepair, and it's been in the last few years, it was purchased by David Kingham and Jennifer Renwick.
Okay.
And they completely revamped and upgraded it. And I would say anyone who wants a really solid photographic community where you can learn and share ideas, and it's not social media at all, check out naturephotographers.net. It's a really great photographic community.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. I know that because I've watched a little bit about Photo Cascadia before. Why don't you talk a little bit about that for people that may be unfamiliar with the group and why it exists and what it does?
Sure. So I think 14 years ago, somewhere in there, Adrian Klein, who was someone that I met through NPN, had this idea. And at the time there had been other kind of photography collectives throughout time. There's the famous F64 group of, Ansel Adams and the other folks that were part of that group. And there had been other groups kind of even in that period of time that we knew about. But Adrian thought, you know what, it'd be cool to have a group of like-minded, similar kind of disposition Northwest photographers, just to kind of be able to work together with, support each other, run ideas by, all of that. So he reached out to 5 other photographers that he knew through NPN, and we all kind of knew each other tangentially, and said, hey, I'm thinking of kind of forming this group. Anybody interested? And all 5 of us said yes. So that formed the original 6 members of Photo Cascadia. So it's Adrian Klein, Chip Phillips, Zach Schnepp, Kevin McNeil, David Cobb, and myself. And then a couple years after that, after we had been going together with that group, we became aware of Erin Bobnick and her photography. And kind of in the same time period, she reached, was aware of Photo Cascadia and connected with us. And so, we just really impressed with her work and her writing and her artistry and all of that. And so eventually we invited her to be part of the group. And so the 7 of us now have been that group for quite a while. And in terms of what the group is, it's just really a photography collective. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's not a business on its own. We all have our own individual businesses. It's a place where we're now just really good friends and colleagues that have stood the test of time. We collaborate on all sorts of projects and ideas together. We team up in 2s and 3s to lead workshops. We often end up more than one of us together at a photo conference at the same time. We've done books together. We've done, calendar projects, lots of different image licensing projects. That being a group of 7 photographers gives you a library of images that any one photographer would be difficult to have available.
Sure.
So it's been a lot of advantages, but I would say the biggest thing, if anything, that has come out of Photo Cascadia is that it's just really great relationships and partnerships with those people.
Yeah, and I think it sort of highlights that need for photographers to network with one another. And I get if you're in a fairly remote location, that can be quite difficult because you might be the only one for 100 miles around. But that ability to network and actually put your collective minds together and say, okay, well, this is a really good idea, and bounce ideas off one another. I think that's a fantastic thing that you can do as a photographer to get yourself, I guess, lined up, particularly if you're making a business out of it.
Absolutely. And I see it, quite a lot these days. I was just on a podcast a couple of days ago with three guys, 2 of them from the UK and then another Australian, Matt Bishop, who now lives in Italy, I guess. But the 3 of them kind of have a collective and a podcast they do together and have a really great kind of trifecta there. It seems really great. And that's the thing too with the technology we have these days here, and we're having this conversation like we're in the same room and you're on the other side of the world for me. And
that's right.
So you don't have to have photographer. I mean, if you have photographers that you can go out and go to the pub with, on a Friday night, that's great.
Absolutely.
But if you don't, you're not without options. And that's how, Photo Cascadia, we're spread across the Pacific Northwest. The closest Photo Cascadia to member to me is 3.5 hours away. And we see each other as a group maybe once a year in person. But that doesn't stop us from being able to collaborate and work together.
Yeah. You mentioned a little while ago, if you get bored with photography, do you ever get bored with photography? Have you ever hit a creative wall and said, "Nah, I don't want to do this anymore," or is it
I never
always go on?
I never do. I never do. I think I get bored with the act of taking photographs from time to time, kind of as I mentioned earlier, where today I don't feel like taking a photograph. And I hear people talk about that, it's like artist block or, what am I going to do? It's been 5 days and I just can't bring myself to go take any photographs. And I'm thinking, that's so that's fine. That's right. I mean, I get that some people, it depends on how you've set up if you're in photography as a business, if your business is designed around going out and creating photos every day, like you're photographing for clients and they expect you to show up on the day you said you'd be there. I get that. That's different. But if photography is your hobby, or if you do a photography business that isn't dependent on creating images every single day, then being bored with or not interested in taking photos sometimes, to me, is not the same as being bored with photography.
No, yeah.
And so for me, I'll go sometimes days, weeks, months without taking a photograph. But when I do get back out there and feel the impulse to go take a photograph, it's still probably even more amazing than it was at the beginning. I still just get as energized by it when I'm out doing it and I'm in that right space for it.
What's your favorite thing about being a photographer?
Oh, for me, the favorite thing is that it's somehow this incredible activity that I don't understand it. I don't question it, but it's enabled me to do things I enjoy doing, be creative, appreciate my world and nature and the things that are going on around me. As a science teacher, to connect with kind of the realities of weather and optics and nature and ecosystems and all of that. And then also somehow make a living at it. So that's not one thing, but the fact that all of those things kind of meet in the middle for me.
Yeah.
I love that. And again, I don't know how that works. I'm just glad that it does. And I'm going to just ride it as long as I can.
Why not?
Yeah.
What's your least favorite thing about being a photographer?
Oh boy. I don't know if there's anything about the actual photography itself that I dislike. But I don't enjoy, with the business aspect, as soon as you bring a business into it, and that's always, I think, a danger for anyone who is passionate about photography as a hobby, is if you decide you're going to, overlap it with business stuff, is that going to ruin your hobby for you?
Yeah.
Fortunately
it's
for
me, feel like work as opposed to
fun.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or the pressure of, that you're out doing it because you got to figure out how to make a living from it versus being able to just do the thing you enjoy with no pressure. And I know plenty of people who tried and realized it was ruining photography for them and said, I'm going to go do something else. And other people that just know instinctively and said, I do this to not work. And so I'm not going to deliberately, I'm not going to.
It's a form of relaxation as opposed to something that I want to make money out of. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the last thing I would ever think of doing with my photography is making a business out of it. So I get all of that. But now I lost the thread.
Sorry,
where I was going with that.
What was your least favorite thing about photography?
Oh, the least favorite, right. So the business part. So, there's parts of running a business, and that's not just photography, any business, you got to balance the books. You got to file your taxes.
You got to pay tax. Yeah.
I have to figure out why my website is broken. I need to do, a lot of those kinds of administrative things, but that's really not that's just called business. I mean, or work. I mean, when we work, that's part of it.
And if you're a small business, you're the CEO, the marketing manager, the the cleaner,
Right.
et cetera,
Exactly.
et
All of
cetera.
it. Yeah. And so that does, if I get bored with anything or bored, it just becomes tedious. Or if I think in the morning when I get up and think about my day, every once in a while, some of those things are like, oh, I wish I didn't have to go do that right now. That's the stuff. But none of that's really photography when I get down to it.
Yeah, sure, sure. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
Well, I think to me, it seems biggest challenge is this: if you're someone who wants to have a voice or be seen in the world as a photographer, I think that's extremely challenging right
Yeah.
now, and only getting harder all the time.
Mm.
I know so many people who are brilliant photographers who do it completely personally. They've never shown a photograph to anyone who they didn't know personally. They have no interest in having a Instagram page or a website or anything like that. They just, and for them, it's not a challenge because they know exactly why they're doing photography, and it's not a challenge for them. But I think for some of us, and I'm included in that, is part of being a photographer is that my photographs get seen and get out there. And there's just so many people doing it these days, and it's so easy to share photographs that it's, really great photographs and great photographers are lost in the tide.
Yeah.
And so to feel like you're able to, I think for some people that's a real challenge. They feel like if I'm not being seen, if my images aren't being seen, if I'm not getting the thumbs up on Facebook, or I'm not getting a huge following on Instagram, or whatever their measure is of success as a photographer, they feel like they're not succeeding. And that could be the complete opposite of the truth. But I definitely see a lot of photographers that's a challenge for them. They get disheartened because photography becomes about the numbers rather than what you personally are doing it for.
Yeah. I've said this to a number of people, not just on the podcast, but in Twitter Spaces and a few other forums. When people are talking about that as an issue, that they're struggling with engagement on social media and so forth, I just say, well, why did you start photography in the first place? Remember that, keep that in your mind, and forget about the numbers. The numbers will come and go as they do, because the algorithm will change, or people will look at your work and go, stylistically it's not for me, and move away from that style of photography maybe. So it's really about thinking about what's in it for you and why you started. And I think a lot of people that get caught up in that social media I guess depression cycle forget that, and they don't realize that those numbers in and of themselves aren't that important.
Yeah, and I get it, because it's hard, and I do the same thing. I post been doing it for decades, and I post a photo, and then all day long I'm checking, anybody like it? What are people saying? I'm in the same boat. We all are. It's so hard to not be there. But at the same time, I can also honestly say, if social media disappeared tomorrow, if my business in photography dried up and not another cent came in tomorrow, would I still go for a walk in the hills with my camera?
That's
I absolutely would.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing to keep in the back of your mind when your numbers aren't going the way that you'd like them to, is to say, well, would you be carrying that camera and the backpack full of gear out into the bush or out to the coast or whatever? And if the answer is yes, I would, well, that's all that really matters.
Precisely. Yeah, I think so too.
Where do you see the future of photography going?
Well, I hope there'll always be a space in landscape photography for the kind of sense of exploration and adventure and discovery and personal artistic exploration. I hope there'll always be that. Whatever else photography becomes, I hope that will be available to people on whatever level.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I mean, obviously, as more people do it, as there's more ways to share it and have it out there, and so there's a bigger and bigger supply and a lower and lower demand. And also now, as we see, I've fiddled around with, I don't know if you're aware of some of the AI software. Midjourney is one of them that I messed around with the other day just because I was curious. But the fact now that anyone can type in a few words and it spits out images for you. I mean, at this point, they're still not photographs, but we're not far away, and it will be. They will be indistinguishable.
They're getting close to being photorealistic, and it won't be long before they are. And I can see a time where in your phone camera there'll be an AI component which will allow you to enhance the image. You don't like the sky, change it. If you and all you have to do is say change the sky to a nice red sunset or whatever. You say that into your phone, your camera changes it, there's your picture, post it on Instagram, happy days.
Right. And that's where I always come back to, and I don't know if this will be true or not. I mean, because that may, when any image possible, and even images that aren't possible because there are places that don't even really exist, but they look like they do. When those are available, like air, does that completely take all the value away from photography? And that's where I come back to. I honestly feel like, I mean, it probably take some of the value away from photography, but for those of us that really enjoy the process of going out into the landscape, being part of that, and then taking something from our experience and our mind and our vision and recording it that'll still be worth doing, even if it's just I'm the only one who ever sees it.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And it goes back to what you said before. If you were going out there to take that shot anyway, you're going to do it. And I don't see human creativity being in any way threatened necessarily by the AI side of things. In terms of landscape photography anyway, I can sort of see where product photography might head that way, because you now got the ability in the hands of a creative director who doesn't know what an ISO setting is or whatever. He doesn't need the photographer now, because he can type a few words in and the computer spits out a nice image the way that he wants it. And he gets half a dozen choices like he wants, and so forth. So I can kind of see where product photography might get eaten away a little bit, but
I think as an I totally agree. I think as an artistic pursuit, and just as kind of the one thing that I don't think, at least not yet, that AI can recreate or reproduce for us is experience. And I always think about my brother, who started and owned and operated a bike shop for decades. And at some point, after he was in the bicycle business for quite a while, he realized that you could go on the internet and order any bike part cheaper than he could even get it himself, let alone sell it to you. So you're always going to go online and get a better deal. So he patterned his whole bike shop around experience, because cyclists love and are passionate about riding bikes and hanging out with other people who love riding bikes.
It's like photographers like hanging around with other photographers.
Exactly. And what you can't do on whatever bike part website is you can't go to his shop and sit down and have him pour you a beer and sit there at the counter drinking a beer, chatting with other cyclists while he works on your bike. The internet can't replace that experience. And that's what I think about photography too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. Well, nearing the end of our time together, I've got a couple of questions. One is, are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to?
I would say anybody from the Photo Cascadia team
Sure.
would be a great person to interview. So you can just go to the Photo Cascadia site and pick a name or pick them all. They're all great folks and have interesting perspectives and stories and really talented. And then, a lot of my photography friends and colleagues kind of in the Western US that I know well, or I think names that are probably familiar to a lot of people. But people like, Alex Noriega and
Yep.
obviously,
Yep.
Nick Page and Ryan Dyer and those folks are all well known. But I think there are some great lesser known photographers out there as well that are always great to talk to. And I run across so many of them all the time, and I probably what I should do is go kind of look through my email list and my messages and send you some names because
Oh, that'd be great. Fantastic.
yeah, I'm gonna do that because there are so many really great photographers out there that aren't on podcasts all the time already that I just think have really important things to share.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lastly, and for many who listen, this is probably my most important question. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know what the right answer in Australia is to that
There isn't
question.
one.
Oh, okay. Because certainly parts of the world there is a right answer.
Oh, I
to that
know.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of my Italian guests are an absolute no.
Is that right? Is that right? Well, I grew up, anybody who's from Oregon, or especially Southern Oregon, will know Abby's Legendary Pizza,
Uh-huh.
which is the pizza I grew up on in the little, podunk town that I grew up in. But yeah, the Hawaiian pizza with the Canadian bacon and pineapple, that is a staple in small town Oregon living.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. We
And
have a weird one. Sorry.
I was going to say, what's your answer to that question?
My answer is I won't necessarily order it, but if it's on the pizza, I'm happy to eat it.
All right. Fair enough.
I won't necessarily go out of the way. But we have this weird anomaly over here in Australia where we also do pineapple on burgers. And also for pizzas, we've got an egg. So you basically crack a raw egg on the pizza before it goes in the oven, and you can pretty much have I think the typical is it has bacon, maybe pepperoni, but bacon, cheese, tomato base, and the egg cracked on top of it. That's an Aussie pizza.
Egg on pizza is great for me, and pineapple on anything, burgers, you name it. Pineapple's great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, it's been really brilliant having you on the show today, Sean. Fantastic getting to know you better and learning more about what you do and how you do it. Where can people find your work?
So my website is the main place to kind of find me, and it's outdoorexposurephotography.com, which is a kind of a long name. You can just Google Sean Bagshaw and put photography on the end, and you'll find me as well. And of course, all the usual social media places out there, and YouTube and all of that. And the Photo Cascadia website as well. Definitely check out Photo Cascadia. And yeah, those are the main places.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Grant. This has been great. You're a really good podcaster and interviewer. I had a great time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And a good photographer, I'll say as well.
I'll take that. Thank you. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.